focused. I'm just going to talk to you for about a quarter of an hour or so, no longer than that. I'm going to give you some of the results of our trade analysis, as Sarah mentioned. But really, this is the basic. We're looking at statistics here. It gives you a bit of an insight. What we really want is feedback from you. Some of the things that the slides will raise some issues, I think. But the key thing is that we want your feedback. So actually, we're going to have quite an active session, I hope. We'll have one whole group exercise, and then we'll move into the groups. But first, I'll just run through some trade statistics for you. I'm going to talk to you about the EU market for VPA partner timber products. Now, of course, we all know that all VPA partner countries, they are all tropical countries. So I'm talking to you specifically about tropical wood products, but within the context of the VPA process. Now, first to put this trade into some sort of global context, this slide here shows the growth of the global trade in tropical timber products worldwide over the last 15 years or so. I put this slide up partly to show you what products I'm talking about. I'm talking about every single product in the HS, the Harmonized System of Product Codes, Chapter 44, which is all wood products, and also wood products which are covered in Chapter 94, that's the wood furniture products. I'm not going to talk to you about pulp and paper here, partly because I don't think there's anybody involved in the pulp and paper sector in this room, but partly because it's a very specific trade from the tropics. It's all coming out of Indonesia, and not a lot of it actually comes into the EU. So I'm talking primarily about solid wood products. I show this slide quite a lot. Some people are quite surprised when I show a slide showing actual growth in tropical wood trade over the last 15 years. There has been actual growth worldwide in trade of wood products from tropical countries. And you'll see it's pretty much down to one single country. I'll show you the next slide, thanks. Oh, it hasn't been changed. Go to the next slide. I'll come back to that slide. Yeah, it's this slide. This shows the supply of tropical wood products by the principal supply countries into the global trade. And the green line is very, very significant. It's Vietnam. Vietnam's exports of wood products, primarily furniture, have risen at a rate of about 1 billion per year over the last 15 years or so. Quite an extraordinary rate of growth. A lot of that is wood furniture. A lot of that goes to North America, to the United States. Vietnam is, of course, a VPA partner country. It's a country which recently signed a VPA and has moved to the implementing stage. And they have a very ambitious program in Vietnam to implement a flake tea licensing system within a matter of years. So that could transform the market for flake tea licensed timber, we feel. This line here, the purple line, also very significant from a flake tea VPA perspective. That is Indonesia. Indonesia was the first country to implement flake tea licenses from November 2016. One question that is of very great interest to us is why is this gap? Why is there this gap between Indonesia down here and Vietnam up here? Why is Indonesia apparently not growing in global trade? Why is it less competitive than Vietnam? That's something we wanted to explore in our research and in the feedback we received from the trade. Malaysia, the third largest supplier, very interesting country of course, was for many years the largest tropical wood supplier in the world. It's lost that status recently, been overtaken by Vietnam and by Indonesia. The trade volumes are coming down, partly because of tightening of log controls, regulations, in Sarawak, in East Asia, in East Malaysia particularly, and there's a narrowing range of products coming out of Malaysia. A lot of this now is furniture actually, it's weldwood based furniture. And then Thailand, the fourth largest exporter, again, completely different product profile. A lot of this is plantation wood, acacia rubber wood, and a lot of that product goes into China, although Thailand is a reasonably important supplier of furniture to the global market, including the EU. And then it's only down here we get to the first African country on the list, also another VPA country, Cameroon, VPA implementing country. Very important, I know, from the perspective of the EU and from Spain particularly, is the largest supplier of tropical wood products into Spain. Go to the next slide. Yes, we do have a session on Africa. That's the next workshop, but I just wanted to put this up because it gives quite a good perspective on what seems to have happened in Africa over the last 10 years or so. I think in the early, about 15 years ago, everybody involved in policy work related to tropical wood products in Africa, we were hoping back then that there would be a significant move away from exports of primary wood products in Africa towards more value-added products, particularly certified value-added products. The whole policy focus was oriented towards achieving that. Unfortunately, that policy has been pretty much a failure in many ways. And this shows you some of the reasons why. Rather than seeing a decline in primary wood exports from Africa, there's actually been quite a significant increase, and actually an increase in exports of logs. There's been a narrowing up here. These are the value-added products, products like mouldings and decking, veneer and plywood. These product groups have become, the exports of those products have become less from Africa and have a lesser share of the market. And if we look over here, this explains a large part of the reason from that. The EU, in light blue here, is a less important export market for African wood products, and there's been this huge increase in exports to China, particularly China, and also more recently an increase to Southeast Asia. In fact, this is mostly going into Vietnam from Cameroon. So big transformation in the market there, which has meant, to some extent, this is quite important, obviously, from a FLEGT perspective, a reduction to some extent of the leverage of the EU in the African market, a very significant trend. So what are the implications of that for the FLEGT process and also for private sector initiatives like certification? Very important considerations that we need to give to this, to the African trade. We'll probably hopefully have more of a chance to talk about that in the next workshop. If you go back to the second slide, go back, reverse. This one, yeah. This is showing the global trade in wood products, the first slide, but this is now broken up into the major import regions. It emphasizes again the changing importance of different markets worldwide. This green one, of course, particularly dramatic, very volatile. This is exports of tropical wood products into China. And they grew hugely between 2012 and 2014. This was a huge speculative boom in rosewood, which probably added about $3.5 billion US to the trade with China in tropical wood products. But then that has now, of course, that has burst, that particular speculative boom. Also, the Chinese economy is slowed to some extent, and that has now come off the boil, although it has the exports of tropical wood products into China have just begun to rise again in the last couple of years. This is North America in purple. This is almost all wood furniture, and primarily coming from Vietnam. A lot of this actually probably isn't even made of tropical timber, but we don't know the exact proportion that is made of tropical timber. A lot of it is tempered hardwood. A lot of it's actually American hardwood and also European oak and that sort of thing. But we don't know the exact proportion. This is Northeast Asia here, Japan, South Korea, which were formerly very big markets for logs, now buying mainly value-added products, such as plywood and also wood furniture. And also, incidentally, a lot of this spike here is due to an increase in imports of biomass energy wood. The EU here used to be the biggest importer of tropical wood products worldwide. It's now the fourth largest region, and it's been bumping along the bottom. Last year there was a little bit of an increase, and actually this year, the first 6 months of this year, there's been a 16% increase in tropical wood product imports into the EU. One of the questions we want to know is that a short-term bump, a return to growth, or is it something longer term, and maybe we might see a longer term increase in imports from the tropics? We don't know yet. A few other regions, yeah, India was growing, buying a lot of logs, for example, from Myanmar, although there's lots tighter log restrictions in that region. That's tending to decline. Let's go on to the next few slides. Yes, just focusing in now on the EU market. This shows the share of total EU import. Blue here, that's the tropics. So back in 2004, that's the tropics. So back in 2004, tropical wood accounted for something like 35% of total EU imports of wood products. And that descended to a low here in 2014 of about 21%, and then it's been bumping along. It increased a little bit in 2015, and it declined to about 20% or 19% in 2018. This year, I reckon it'll probably go up to about 21, 22% again, so a little bit of an increase. Initially, tropical wood lost share to China. More recently, it's been losing share to Russia and the CIS region. North America, a lot of that is actually energy wood, pellets and that sort of thing. Latin America, relatively small share of total EU imports, but I know it's more important in the Spanish market than elsewhere in the EU. Yeah, so one of the questions we want to ask is, what are the opportunities to transform the market for tropical wood in the EU? Is one of the opportunities created, I mean, there's a lot of talk about one of the opportunities being created through the development of forest certification in the tropics and using that as a marketing tool for tropical wood. There might be something in that, although the actual data, if you look statistically, the data doesn't really support that conclusion. There has been considerable, there has been considerable growth in forest certification over the years, of course, in terms of area worldwide, but it has been very uneven. In fact, the area of certified forest is just beginning, or showed signs of weakening last year for the first time ever. And that is, in my view, because certification, the whole movement, it has certified the low-hanging fruit, the large state-owned forests, the large government, the large industrial plantations in the world, and it's struggling to certify more difficult areas, those where there's more fragmented land bases, and those where there is poorer governance around the world. And it's got to a sort of level now, and it is beginning to decline. A lot of the certification worldwide is in temperate regions, and this is over here, the tropics. Only a very small share of total forest area in the tropics is certified at the moment under FSC or PEFC. So this is a big question. How far can certification, for example, contribute to the re-establishment of tropical wood in the EU market? It's a big question. Next slide, please. Another option, of course, is to move down the flag T route, and in many ways this has considerable advantages, and that the main advantage of the flag T platform is it does offer, has potential to offer considerably more scale in the supply of wood, which has some sort of verification status. And a verification status which of course provides a green lane through the EU timber regulation. If we look at the flag T countries in total EU trade in tropical wood products, they account in total for something in the region of 75 to 80% of all EU imports of wood products. Indonesia, in fact, is the largest single supplier alongside Vietnam. Vietnam and Indonesia together. Indonesia, of course, accounts already for 21% of EU tropical timber imports in 2018. And as we mentioned before, that has been flag T licensing since November 2016. Taken together with Vietnam, which has a very ambitious program to move towards flag T licensing, that again accounts for about 21%. So those two countries together account for about 42% of total EU tropical wood imports. All the VPA implementing countries together in Africa, that's Cameroon, Central African Republic, Ghana, Liberia, and Congo. They account for 10% more. And then there's 2 VPA implementing countries in South America, Honduras and Guyana, which currently supply only negligible volumes into the EU, but again there may be opportunities to expand those volumes in the EU. And then there's 3 countries which are currently negotiating a voluntary partnership agreement in Africa. These are Ivory Coast, DRC, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and Gabon. They account for another 7%. And then the VPA negotiating countries in Asia account for 16%. The biggest one, of course, being Malaysia, second biggest being Thailand, and Laos, Laos is a relatively small supplier into the EU. Together, the tropical non-VPA countries account for about 25% of tropical wood supply into the EU. That's actually increased slightly over the last couple of years, and that's partly because there's been quite a big increase in imports of decking from Brazil, which is not a VPA country, quite a big increase in furniture imports from India, which is interesting because India is supplying furniture products which are quite similar to some of the products coming out of Indonesia. And India does have very little. It has some sort of national legality system, although we don't know how credible or how solid that system is. Certainly doesn't compare to a plenty licensing system. There's very little private sector certification in India. So how are they getting their assurances of supply? It's quite an interesting question. And the same with China. Although China, of course, is not a tropical country, it does supply a lot of plywood with a tropical face. A lot of that actually going into specifically into the UK. Next one, please. Just to focus on, you probably know these figures better than me. These are the figures I've taken from the Eurostat COMEX database, showing Spain's tropical wood products imports, which of course declined to pretty low levels during the financial crisis. There seems to have been a bit of a recovery over the last few years. Certainly between 2015 and 2016 there was quite a big recovery in sawnwood imports, particularly into Spain. It's bumped along a little bit. Actually this year seems to have risen quite strongly. There's been about a 20%, according to the data, about a 20% increase in imports of tropical wood products into Spain. I can see some shrugs and looks of amazement, and I have to say I don't trust the data either. This is what Eurostat COMEX database, we're relying on poor data. So it could be okay, we don't know. That's the sort of question we want answered. Is this really happening in Spain, in your view? And if it is, that's great. Could you explain why? Or if it's not, we'd like to hear more about that as well. That's just sharing the same data but splitting it out into products. I mean, this is actually the sawnwood increase into Spain this year, according to the COMEX data, in metric tons. It shows there's been actually a very large increase in sawnwood. Suggests the veneer imports have declined a bit. Wood furniture has been rising slowly, particularly from Vietnam in recent years. Plywood has been pretty volatile but seems to be declining. Next one, please. And then this is showing the tropical wood product imports by the main supply country and their VPA status. So the yellow boxes are VPA negotiating countries. The green box here, of course, is Indonesia. That's the plenty licensing country. And then we have Vietnam, VPA influencing country. Cameroon, of course, is very central, we understand, to the Spanish market. And this is where the trade data is showing there's been a big increase of sawnwood imports from Cameroon this year. And about a doubling. Could be something wrong with the data, we don't know. It's unusual, but it's both in quantity terms and in value terms. That figure is showing up on the trade data. A lot of the product comes indirectly through the EU. We know that, although the volume of imports, indirect imports, seems to have declined this year. And then Brazil, which is a non-VPA country, we know is a very important supplier of tropical wood products into Cameroon, into Spain, and there's been quite a big increase in the last year or so from there. Vietnam, the principal supplier of tropical wood furniture into Spain. So that's the introductory slides on the trade flows. I think there's probably some food for thought there. Certainly some questions might be arising from some of the figures which were shown.